19 days. That's how long I spent getting the house ready for a dinner that never happened. And it took a single voicemail to undo all of it. A voicemail I played twice before I let myself understand what it meant. "We're doing Thanksgiving up at his folks' cabin this year, Mom. You don't mind, right? It's just easier. Easier." I stood at the counter with my hand still dusted in flour, the phone pressed to my ear, and I remember thinking that word over and over like it was a stone I could turn until it made sense. Easier for whom? I didn't call back right away. What would I have even said? "Of course, sweetheart. No trouble at all." I'd been saying versions of that for 30 years. I could have recited it in my sleep. The table was already set. I'd done it the night before, because I like to look at a thing finished, and because my hands ache in the mornings, and I wanted the fine work done while I still had light in my fingers. 10 places. The good plates, the ones with the thin gold rim that had been my mother's, that I only take down twice a year. Cloth napkins I'd ironed and folded into little standing fans. A trick I learned from a woman at church 40 years ago and have never once had cause to teach anyone. 2 candles I hadn't lit yet. A centerpiece of bittersweet and dried hydrangea I'd clipped from the side yard and arranged in the cut glass bowl. By noon, the turkey was resting under foil, gold and enormous, a bird so big I'd had to hold the edge of the counter and breathe before lifting it out of the oven. There was the pot roast for the ones who don't care for poultry. My mother's cornbread made in her cast iron pan, the one with her initials scratched faint into the handle. Green beans done the long, slow way with bacon, the way my husband liked them before he passed. 2 pies, apple and a pumpkin I'd bought the good cinnamon for, the kind that costs more than it has any business costing. A bowl of the little butter cookies my daughter used to steal off the cooling rack when she was small, before her hands got big enough to reach without a stool. I had a record playing, not that it matters. Just music, filling up the room so the house wouldn't sound the way it looked. And I sat down in the good chair by the front window, the one that looks out on the road, and I waited a little while. Not because I thought they were coming. I knew by then they weren't. I just wasn't ready yet to be a woman sitting alone in a house full of food, so I gave myself a few more minutes of being a woman who might, at any moment, see headlights turn into the drive. None turned in. It had gone gray and still outside, that flat late November light that never quite decides to be day. A little snow was coming down, the early kind that doesn't stick. We get weather like that up here on the coast. I'd lived in that house 41 years, and the seasons at least had never let me down. After a while I did the thing I shouldn't have. I got my phone and I opened up my daughter's page. There they all were. The cabin, which is not a cabin at all but a great glass-fronted thing her husband's parents built on the lake, all warm light and a fire going. My daughter in a sweater I didn't recognize, laughing with her head tipped back. Her husband carving something at a long table, crowded with people I half knew and mostly didn't. My 2 grandsons, the boys, sprawled on the floor with a dog that wasn't theirs. And in the corner of one photo, a spread of food on the counter. A store-bought pie still in its plastic dome, a foil pan somebody had brought. She'd captioned it, "So thankful for these people. So thankful." I set the phone face down on the arm of the chair. I want to tell you I was angry. I've told the story since, to 1 or 2 people I trust, and they always want it to be anger, because anger is clean and it has somewhere to go. But that isn't what I felt. What I felt was more like the feeling you get when you reach for a stair that isn't there. That drop in the middle of you. I felt like the wrapping paper after the gift is out. Bunched up on the floor, done its one job. Nobody's fault. Nothing personal. Just no longer part of the day. She hadn't even told the boys. I could see that much. Their faces in those photos were easy and bright. They didn't know their grandmother had a turkey the size of a toddler cooling in her kitchen. They didn't know I'd driven clear over to the good market in the next town twice, once for the cinnamon and once because I forgot the pecans and couldn't stand the thought of the pie without them. Whatever my daughter told them, it would have been soft and vague and kind-sounding. "Grandma's tired this year, we'll see her soon." Grandma understands. And here is the thing that took me the longest to sit with. I did understand. That was almost the worst of it. I understood exactly. I got up and turned off the record because the cheerfulness of it had started to feel like a hand on my shoulder I hadn't asked for. Then I stood in my kitchen and looked at all of it. The food, the flowers, the 10 places. And I thought a thought I had never once let myself finish before. Would they notice, I wondered, if I simply stopped? Not stopped loving them. I could no more stop that than stop my own pulse. I mean the other thing. The doing. The being available. The showing up early to babysit and staying late to clean. The check that went out the first of every month without a word said about it, for so many years now that none of us thought of it as a check anymore. It had just become weather. Something that happened. Something you counted on the way you count on the tide. Would they miss me, or would they only miss the convenience of me? I had never asked because I had never wanted the answer. But standing there that afternoon, 68 years old in a dress I'd bought special and shoes that pinched, I found I wanted the answer more than I wanted almost anything. I was tired in a way sleep doesn't touch. I was tired of being the safe one, the dependable one, the one whose feelings could always be dealt with later. I didn't eat, I couldn't have. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the low cabinet in the front room and I dug out the photo albums. They were heavy, those books, padded covers gone soft and shiny at the corners, little loose snapshots tucked in wherever I'd run out of pages. I carried the fattest one to the couch and laid it across my knees and just sat there a minute with my hand flat on the cover before I opened it. The first picture in that album is my daughter at maybe 3, in a red corduroy jumper, standing in the middle of a living room I haven't lived in for decades. My husband took it. I know that because I can almost feel him behind the camera, hear him saying, "Hold still, baby girl." That was a lean year for us. We had no business having a nice Christmas or Thanksgiving or anything else, and I'd made do. I remember cutting shapes out of the last of the good flour, and she ate half of them off the pan and told me, with the total certainty only a small child has, that it was best day of her whole life. I turned the pages slow. There she was at 7, gap-toothed. At 12, mortified to be photographed. At 16, arms crossed, pretending she didn't want to be there but they're all the same. Her graduation. Her wedding, where I cried so hard my husband had to hand me his handkerchief twice. Then the babies. Then, and this is the part that put the lump in my throat, then less of her. Fewer pictures, gaps between the pages, whole years that got a single photo, and then not even that. I found the last Thanksgiving where everyone had come to my house. 6 years back. I remembered it, not because it was good, but because it wasn't. My daughter had brought a bagged salad and left it in its bag. Her husband kept looking at his watch like a man waiting for a train. The boys tore through the meal without tasting it, and one of them asked, right out loud, when they could go to their other grandmothers for dessert. My daughter shushed him, embarrassed, and I smiled the way I always smiled, and I told him, of course, "Sweetheart, you go on." And I meant it, or I made myself mean it, which after enough years is nearly the same thing. I closed the book and set it on the cushion beside me, and this heftiness in my chest changed. It stopped being sorrow. It turned into something with more spine to it, because I was beginning to see it, all laid out flat like the pictures themselves. It hadn't started this year. This year was only the year it stopped hiding. For a long time I'd been moved a little at a time from the center of things to the edge of things, so gradually that I'd never once caught it happening. The way you don't see a child grow when you see them every day, and then one afternoon they're looking down at you. And then the doorbell rang. I nearly came up out of my skin. Nobody rings my bell on a holiday. Nobody rings it much at all. My first thought was a delivery gone wrong, the wrong house. But then came a soft knock right on the front window glass, 3 little taps, and I knew that knock. I'd know it anywhere. It was Marnie, my granddaughter. 17 that year, all legs and elbows, standing on my step in a coat too thin for the weather with her cheeks gone pink and a thermos hugged against her chest. "Hi, Gran," she said, and did a little embarrassed lift of her free hand. I got the door open and the cold came in with her. "You came all the way out here?" I told them my stomach hurt. She wouldn't quite look at me, it kind of did. "I brought you cider. I made it, the mulled kind, from the recipe you gave me." She held out the thermos like it was an apology, which I suppose it was, though none of what happened was hers to be sorry for. She stepped inside and I watched her take it all in. The table set for 10, the food untouched on the counter and the sideboard, going cold under its foil. The candles I never lit, I saw her swallow. "I didn't know they weren't coming," she said, very quiet. "I swear I didn't. Mom just said she said it would be less of a fuss for you. Less pressure." I laughed, but there wasn't any fun in it. "Less pressure? I'm sorry." She looked down at her boots. "I think Mom didn't want you to be upset." Or, she stopped. She was young, but she was not stupid, and I watched her decide to say the true thing. Or she didn't want to hear what you'd say if she asked you straight out. So she didn't ask. She just told you after. "A voicemail's easy to leave," I said. "Easier than a conversation." "It was pumpkin," she said, gesturing at the thermos, getting flustered. "No, the cider's apple." I don't know why I said pumpkin. I just wanted to see you. I didn't want you here by yourself. I took the thermos out of her hands and set it down and put the kettle on instead, because cider is fine, but I wanted tea and I wanted her to stay long enough to drink it. We sat at the corner of the big set table. The two of us, one lonesome pair at the end of all those empty gold-rimmed plates. I didn't ask her what the others were doing. I could see it well enough on my phone. Instead, I let her talk. About school. About a boy who was maybe or maybe not a boyfriend. About a book she was reading that she wanted me to read too. She spoke gently, the way you'd speak in a hospital room, and every kind word out of her landed on me like a warm cloth on a bruise. When she left an hour later, I stood on the step and watched her taillights go, and then I went back inside to all that food, and I made myself a plate, finally. I ate a little cornbread standing up at the counter. It was good. My mother's recipe never fails, and somewhere between the first bite and the last, cold and alone in my own kitchen, I made up my mind. I want to be clear about something, because people always assume the worst. It was not revenge. I have never had the taste for it. I didn't lie awake plotting anybody's downfall. What came over me that night wasn't a fever, it was the opposite. It was the calmest I'd felt in years. It was clarity. For 3 decades I'd told myself that giving was just what mothers do. Give, help, smooth the road, catch the fall. And maybe that's true. Maybe that is a kind of love. But love that comes with no respect stops being love and turns into a habit. And a habit is not a family. They'd taken everything I'd offered. Every single thing. Everything except me. And that, I decided, was going to change. Now I should tell you what everything meant, because it was more than a covered dish and a folded napkin. When my husband died, he left me comfortable. Not rich. We were never rich. But he'd been careful his whole life in a way that people who grow up with nothing tend to be. And between the house being paid off and his pension, and the little he'd put by, I had enough that I never had to worry. And when my daughter and her husband bought their big house 8 years back, the one that was frankly more house than 2 people with 2 children need, the numbers didn't work. So I helped. I made up the difference on the mortgage each month. Just for a while, we all said. Just till they got their feet under them. Their feet never quite got under them. There was the boat one summer. The kitchen they redid. The trips, and every month quietly the difference went out from my account into theirs. And after the first year nobody thanked me for it because you don't thank the weather. Then there was the boys' school. The private one, with the blazers, the one my daughter said was the only place that would really see their potential. Twice a year that tuition came due, and twice a year I paid it, into an account set up for exactly that, labeled in my ledger in my own hand. And there was more besides. The property tax I'd covered the year her husband was between jobs, the summer camps, the orthodontist, a car once. It ran, all told, well into 6 figures over the years. I'd never added it up because adding it up felt small, felt like keeping score, and I didn't want to be a woman who kept score. But sitting there that Thanksgiving night, I finally let myself add it up, and the number was large enough that I said it out loud in the empty kitchen just to hear it, and then I put my cup in the sink and went to bed. The next morning I was up before the sun, not from weakness, from purpose. I've had mornings in my life where I moved slow because my body made me, and this was not one of those. Every step I took was chosen. I made my coffee without any hurry, no radio, just the drip of it, and the fridge humming to itself. I dressed carefully. I wore the green wool coat my sister gave me the year she died, the one with the horn buttons, because it still fits, and because it makes me feel like a woman who knows what she's about. The bank had just opened when I got there. The carpet still had the vacuum lines in it. A young woman behind the counter gave me the smile they train them to give, and I told her, plainly, that I'd like to sit down with someone about my automatic transfers. She got a man from the account side, a fellow younger than my grandsons will be someday. In a gray suit and a tie his mother probably bought him, and he took me back to a little office, with a dying plant on the sill and a stack of old magazines. He laid the papers out. There were more of them than I'd remembered. The mortgage supplement, the tuition transfers, a standing utilities, reimbursement, I'd honestly forgotten about, all of it neat and highlighted where I needed to look. "I'd like to stop all of them," I said. He glanced up. "All of them, ma'am. All of them." He was too professional to ask why, though I could see the question sitting behind his eyes. He walked me through each one and I signed each one, and my hand did not shake, which surprised me a little. When I handed the pen back, he paused and said, "The way they do. Would you like to redirect any of these? A lot of folks in your situation like to shift the support to a grandchild or set up a—" "Yes," I said before he'd finished, "my granddaughter. I want a savings account opened in her name, and I'll oversee it for now. Whatever I'd been putting toward the boys' tuition, I want going there instead." He wrote it down in the margin. He didn't argue. The whole business took less than half an hour, and when I stepped back out into the cold I felt not light, exactly, not giddy, something quieter than that. Like I'd walked out from under an overhang I hadn't known was over me until the sky was suddenly there. I had one more stop that week, and that was my attorney, a decent man I'd known since my husband was alive. I changed my will. It had left the bulk of everything to my daughter, as wills do, as I'd never once thought to question. Now it would go into a trust for Marnie, for her schooling and her start in life, with the rest spread among a few things I actually cared about. The library, the little food pantry at church, the animal shelter out on the county road where I'd gotten my old cat. My daughter and her husband weren't cut out entirely. I'm not a cruel woman and I don't believe in punishing people past the point that makes sense. But they were no longer the center of it. They were a line item now, the way I had been for years. There's a symmetry to that I didn't plan and can't pretend I didn't notice. I want to say something here, because I know how this can sound, and one of the sharper-eyed people I told this to later said it right to my face. She said, "Isn't that awfully hard, cutting a person off over one missed dinner?" And she was right to say it, and I've thought about it a great deal. It was never about the dinner. The dinner was just the day I couldn't not see it anymore. One skipped holiday in 30 years. I'd have blessed her and told her to go enjoy the lake and meant it, if that were all it was. Married children split their holidays. That's how it's meant to go, and I know it, and I'd have been glad her husband got his turn with his own folks. If she had called me, if she had said, "Mom, we're going to be with his family this year, but we want you to come as our guest, no cooking, no fuss, just come," I'd have wept for happiness and packed a bag. That's the whole difference in the world, and it's the difference nobody ever wants to look at. It wasn't the choice. It was that I found out from a voicemail and Facebook. It was that, after 3 decades of being counted on, I'd been handled, the way you handle a problem you don't feel like dealing with, and it was that I had let it happen. Because I had never once made them stop and see me. I'd made myself so easy, so undemanding, so endlessly available, that of course they'd forgotten a person was in there. I taught them that. Slowly, kindly, over years, I'd taught them I would always understand, and people believe what you teach them. The messages started the day the tuition didn't clear. The first was easy, breezy. "Hey Mom, I think there's a glitch with the bank. The school payment didn't go through. Can you call them? Love you." The second, a few days on, was tighter. Something about the boys asking why I hadn't answered her Thanksgiving text and had she done something. The third, another few days after that, was not breezy at all. Her voice had gone thin and careful, the way it used to get before she'd confess she'd wrecked the car. "Mom, the mortgage came out of our account this month, and it's, Mom, we can't cover all of this. Please, call me. I don't understand what's happening." I didn't call, not out of spite. I just wasn't ready, and I'd finally learned that my not being ready was allowed to matter. In the meantime, I had a house full of food gone past saving in the fridge, and I could not stand the thought of it. Some of it I'd frozen, but not the fresh things, not the pies. And I remembered what a neighbor of mine, a widower named Sal, who lives down the road and lost his wife the same winter I lost my husband, had said to me once. That the holidays are the loneliest stretch of the calendar when your table's gone empty. So I called him. And I called the woman 2 houses up whose kids are all out west. And I put a note on the board at the church about the senior lunch that Wednesday. And I loaded up my car with the frozen turkey and the fixings I could still use, and I brought it all down to the fellowship hall, and I cooked for the folks who came. There were 9 of them, not one of them my blood, and I want to tell you it was the best meal I'd made in years, not because the food was any better than the food I'd made for my family, but because every single person at that table was glad to be there and said so. Sal had 3 helpings of the cornbread and asked me, half serious, if I'd marry him for it. An old teacher I'd not seen in a decade cried a little into her napkin and told me she hadn't had a home-cooked holiday plate since her sister passed. I sat at the head of a table full of people who had somewhere else they could have been and chose to be with me, and I understood, finally and completely, what I'd been starving for. It wasn't gratitude. It was to be wanted. There is a difference, and it's everything. My daughter came to the house in the middle of December. I heard the car and I knew it was her before I looked. She stood on my step in a good coat, and her face was a face I hadn't seen on her, so she smiled and had done something she couldn't undo. Scared and underneath the fear, ashamed. "Can I come in?" she said. I let her in. I did not offer her coffee. Small thing, but I noticed I hadn't, and I noticed I wasn't going to, and that was new for me. She sat on the edge of the couch. I sat in my chair. For a while neither of us said anything, and the quiet did more work than any speech could have. "I saw the bank," she finally said. "All of it. The tuition, the house, everything. And I saw the lawyer's office called about the will." Her voice went unsteady. "Mom, are you? Is this because of Thanksgiving? Because I didn't come?" I'm so sorry, I never thought you'd. You never thought I'd what? I said. Not unkind. Just wanting her to finish it. She couldn't. Her eyes filled up and she didn't wipe them, which I'll give her credit for. I didn't do any of it to punish you, I told her. I want you to hear that and believe it, because it's true. I didn't sit up nights angry at you. I did it because I finally understood something I should have understood 20 years ago. I understood what my love is worth and what it isn't worth handing over for free anymore. I never treated it like it was free, she started. And then she stopped herself and I watched her be honest, maybe for the first time in a long while. That's not true. I did not on purpose. Not because I don't love you. But I did. Greg and I both did. It was just always there, so we stopped seeing it. We stopped seeing that it came from somewhere. From you. It did come from somewhere, I said. It came from a woman who got up early and stayed up late and did without so that you wouldn't have to. And that woman would have kept doing it happily until the day she died. If she'd ever once felt like a person to you instead of a resource. We're scared, she said, and the whole thing came out of her in a rush then, the way things do when the dam finally goes. The mortgage, the school, how far behind they were, how they'd never been any good at planning, how they'd always figured there'd be more time and more money and more of me. We just always thought she couldn't finish that one either. That I'd always be there, I said, so there was no hurry to actually be there for me. She nodded, miserable. I'm not asking you to fix it, I said, gentler now, because she was still my girl, even sitting there having hurt me. You can't fix it, and I don't want you to try. What I want is different. I don't want the calls that only come when the account goes quiet. I don't want to hear from you the week the tuition's due. I want a daughter, not a dependent. Do you understand the difference I'm drawing? I think so, she whispered. Trying to make it right isn't the same as asking me to put the money back. I said, I need you to hear that clear. Showing up isn't a payment plan, it's showing up, with nothing owed either way. She sat with that a long moment. Then she said, how do I even start? You start by picking up the phone on a Tuesday when nothing's wrong, I said, and having nothing to ask me for. You start with a call that a voicemail would have been rude for. That's how you should have told me about Thanksgiving, you know? Not a message left while I was elbow deep in a turkey, a phone call. Mom, we're going to Greg's family this year, and here's how we'd love to still see you. That's all it ever would have taken. That's all it takes now. She left an hour later without the answer she'd come for, which was the money. And I think somewhere on the drive home she understood that not getting it was the kindest thing I'd done for her in years. January came in gray, the way it always does up here, but that year the gray felt less like an ending, and more like a cleared field. The house was quiet. It had been quiet a long time, but the quiet had changed its nature. It wasn't full of disappointment anymore. Wasn't full of listening for cars that don't come. It was just quiet. Just warmth and air and me and the cat. Marnie came by twice that first week. We did a jigsaw puzzle on the kitchen table, 1,000 pieces, a lighthouse, and it took us 3 evenings, and on the last one we stayed up past midnight arguing over a stretch of gray sky that all looked the same. She didn't bring up her parents, and I didn't ask. Her tuition, I might mention, was handled. The trust saw to that directly. No drama. No lesson lost on the boys, who never went without a thing they truly needed. I made sure of it. My quarrel was never with children. My daughter texts me now, tentative, the way you'd approach a horse that's been mishandled. Sometimes about nothing. Sometimes just a picture of the boys. I answer about half of them, and I've made my peace with answering half. Her husband hasn't called, and I don't expect him to, and I've found I sleep fine either way. They cover their own mortgage now. From what I hear, it's been a squeeze. And from what I hear, they've cut some things they used to think they couldn't live without, and it turns out they could. That's the part I feel best about, if I'm honest. Not that they struggled. That they found out they could stand on their own 2 legs, which they never would have found out as long as I kept a leg under each of them. Sal comes by Sundays now, and I feed him, and he fixes whatever I've got that's squeaking or sticking, and neither of us calls it anything, and that suits us both. I sat up one night not long ago with a cup of tea gone cold in my hands and the lamps low, and I thought, not bitterly, I want you to understand, and not sadly either, but plainly, the way you finally see a room when someone opens the curtains. I gave them enough. I gave them more than enough, and what I have left, I am going to spend on myself, and on the ones who actually turn their heads to look at me when I come into a room. I used to think getting old was about getting smaller. Making yourself take up less, wanting less, needing less, asking for less, until you'd folded yourself down small enough to fit in whatever corner of other people's lives they had room to spare. I don't think that anymore. I think what happened to me that gray Thanksgiving, alone with a turkey nobody came for, was that I stopped folding. I unfolded back to the size I was before I spent 30 years making room. So if you've listened this far, and if any of this has settled down next to something you carry too, if you know what it is to make yourself quieter and smaller and easier so that the people you love won't have any reason to leave, then let me tell you the one thing I most wish somebody had told me 20 years back. You do not owe anyone your own disappearing. You are not required to keep handing over your piece to buy a seat at a table where they've already forgotten you were the one who said it. Let them wonder, for once, where the warmth went. Let them feel a little of the cold they got so used to leaving you standing in. And if this found something true in you, don't keep it shut away. Tell somebody. Say it out loud. Because you were never invisible. Not once. You only started to believe you were.